Welcome to Under One Roof MTL, where we are demystifying home ownership one episode at a time. My name is Robin Flynn, joined as always by Fred Pichette and Martin Spalding of Fred and Martin Mortgages. Good morning, Fred.
Good afternoon, Robin.
Oh, yeah, good afternoon.
Oh, it's 12
It's
o'clock.
noon. What am I talking about? It feels like morning. Martin, how are you?
Good afternoon, Robin.
Good afternoon. Also joined by LJ Aguinaga of LJ Realties. Hey, LJ.
Good day, Robin. How you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. We've got a great question of the week this week because it requires more than a one-word answer. So put your thinking caps on if you want the chance to win some cookies from Felix and Norton. You can visit their store at the Blue Haven Shopping Center, by the way, 3705 St. John's Boulevard in DDO. If you think you know it, 514-790-0800 and include your name. Our question this week, what's the difference between the amortization period and the mortgage term? So you'll need to basically define the two so that we can understand the difference. 514-790-0800. Guys, lots of stuff in the news this week. Inflation numbers were out for the month of April. Martin, they were down quite a bit, down to 1.7%, correct?
So the April number came out 1.7, down from 2.3% in March. And so I got bullish about I got bullish about maybe there'll be a rate drop in June. But then you start to dig a little bit deeper. So the drop was mainly because of energy prices, gasoline, natural gas. And it's also worth noting that the carbon tax also contributed to the decline in gasoline prices. But the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, excluding energy, is up 2.9% from 2.5% in March. So economists now are taking a step back going, okay, what are the core factors? What caused this? A weaker Canadian dollar earlier in the year. Tariffs on certain U.S. imports, notably food and vehicle prices. Food is up. Groceries are up. So now the bank and Martin are taking a step back and saying, okay, so we got a weak labor market, which should suggest a cut to stimulate the economy. But on the B side, core inflation, the Bank of Canada's 2% target is off. So it complicates the decision. So I'm now less bullish, and I'm going to throw it to Fred and LJ. Like to hear what they think of a possible rate drop in June.
I think we will have a rate cut this time of 2025. I think last time it was just a pause because too many uncertainty. But I think with the week of the job numbers in Canada, I think it's time to cut it by 2025.
I tend to agree. Based on everything that we're seeing out there, I mean, I had this conversation with a friend earlier this week, right? And everyone's saying, like, are they finally going to use the R word? Are we finally in a recession after all the GDP decline that we've had throughout this entire period? And the fact that nobody's calling this a recession yet is still boggling my mind, to be quite honest. So I definitely think that people could use that relief, use a little bit of a discount. I know we've read tons of articles on how consumer debt is at all-time highs right now, and that people are really struggling with the concept of a renewal on their mortgage. So I think no matter how you want to cut this, Canadians are looking for a cut at this point.
Clearly, from where I sit, I'm still hoping for a cut in June. So
Well, we're always hoping for a cut, right? I mean, to a certain point, I guess at a certain point, you don't want rates to fall too low because that's not a good sign like we saw during COVID, right? Like if rates get too low, then doesn't that impact housing prices, makes prices go up, makes the market busier?
I'd say effectively, as long as you have a mortgage, you probably want these rates to come down. Obviously, as long as you're already a homeowner. If you're not a homeowner yet, then yes, you're a little bit more sensitive to the idea of prices going up in reverse fashion compared to the rates coming down. And also, if you no longer have a mortgage and you have a lot of money invested in bonds and in the market and stuff of that nature, the really, really low interest rates mean that you're not getting as good of a return on some of your investments in high interest savings accounts and that kind of stuff, right? So it really depends on what seat you're sitting on. But I'd say that for the bulk of Canadians, 100%. We want a slightly lower interest rate to help us offset our cost of living.
do we go variable? Do we go fix? Because I can tell you this week, we saw a lot of the major lenders increase their fix rates this week. Is the strategy to go variable, hoping, which is a terrible strategy, hoping that there'll be a cut in June and a further cut later in the fall so that variable will then become more appealing than locking into a fix? It all depends on your risk your ability to manage the risk, and are you willing to game the system or hedge that there will be further cuts?
Well, our new housing minister has an interesting approach. So he's the former mayor of Vancouver, Gregor Robertson. And he said this week that he doesn't think that the prices of homes should go down because that would negatively impact existing homeowners, their retirement plans. What he thinks instead is that affordable housing should be provided through government subsidies. So basically, keep housing prices the same, but give these young Canadians some money to help them purchase their first home. What do we think about this proposition? Is this the right approach? Because for a little while now, it has kind of felt like silent gen and boomers versus millennials and Gen Z. Who are we prioritizing? Keeping housing prices high to fund the older Canadians' retirement or lowering prices to help younger Canadians get homes and start their families? So it feels like you have to pick a side at this point, and it seems like Gregor Robertson has chosen older Canadians.
Now, let's throw in some editorial while we're at it, because it sounds like same old, same old. Once in power, governments work really hard to stay in power. So we know the older electorate are the ones that generally go out and vote, but you also want to make sure that you're appealing to the younger voter so you can get everybody in the same boat. It sounds like they want to make sure they protect your nest egg, so keep the equity high in your, call it your principal property, which you'll probably use in retirement. But at the same time, you go, hey, young people, look what we're doing for you. And next time there's an election, please vote for us.
But how would this work, giving subsidies to Canadians? It's very vague. So are we talking about, expanding the FHSA program? Are we talking about tax cuts for first-time home buyers? What would this work like? How would it work, basically? Because from what I can tell from, most of the young people I've spoken to, their biggest issue is saving up for that down payment. It's so hard to do when you're paying over $2,000 a month in rent to save up at this point, you probably need at least $10,000 to $15,000 for a down payment.
Well, I think you need to leverage all the current programs, but I agree with you, Robin. The toughest part right now is saving up for the down payment. Once you have the down payment, once you get into the housing market, when you compare rents to a mortgage, you're pretty much at par. The toughest part, and I was reading something else this week where somebody living in Vancouver would take them 7 years to save up for the minimum down payment to potentially buy a house in Vancouver. 7 years, just think about how much housing is going to increase over the next 7 years, especially in a place like Vancouver. So I think the biggest issue here is not necessarily mortgage rates or housing prices, it's getting the down payment. And how can you get a down payment? The wealthiest subset of our population are the baby boomers. In other words, your parents. So I think it's time to tap onto your parents and get them to gift you a portion of your down payment.
I would like to propose an idea. So we have employer retirement program matching, right? When I had an RRSP through Bell, for example, you put money into it and your company matches it, and that helps you save for your retirement. What if we initiate programs like this for housing, where you're putting money, it comes off your paycheck automatically, so you don't even have to think about it, and your employer is matching it so that you can get into the housing market and withdraw that money? I feel like that might be a really great incentive to work for a company. We're talking about labor shortages. Wow, that would be a benefit that would get me to work somewhere. Fred, what do
Well,
you think?
smells like there's a revolution
I don't
about
think
to happen.
it's not everyone who want to purchase a property. I don't know if it's mandatory to match your RSP like that. You have more RSP to buy a property. And lately, in the last year and a half, the Liberal government did the Bank of Canada helped first time home buyer by increasing amortization to 30 years. And I know as a fact in their last 4 or 5 first time home buyer file, all the time, I think 4 out of 5 had a gift from the parents, which is the toughest things right now for sure is to save the down payment. But I think if you're making a small budget, you're getting together, getting 5% on 3 or 400,000 dollar, buying a first condo, it's not as hard as people think, especially in Montreal. But again, I get it with the rent that increasing, but you have to start somewhere.
Still to come, is now the right time to buy a cottage? Ooh, vacation property. We will find out after we check traffic at the CJD 800 Traffic Center.
Are you thinking about buying a cottage? This is your Mortgage Minute. Thinking about buying a cottage? You're not alone. Quebec's recreational market is hot right now. Demand is high and prices are climbing. But financing a cottage isn't like getting a mortgage for your home. There are different rules, extra costs, and a few surprises along the way. Whether it's for family time, rental income, or a long-term investment, make sure you understand what's involved before you dive in.
This is Under One Roof MTL on CJD 800. I'm Robin, that's LJ, that's Fred, that's Martin. We are with you until 1 p.m. Vacation homes. Ooh, this is a long-term goal for my husband and I. We dream of having a cottage up in the Laurentians on a lake. I want access to a body of water. That is the dream. But I'm curious what the cottage market looks like right now because I've been reading some big, scary articles. But as LJ has pointed out numerous times, what happens in the rest of Canada isn't always mirrored here in Quebec. It's a very, very unique situation. So I'm curious, LJ, what you're seeing for the cottage vacation property market before we dive into how to actually finance that property.
So in terms of what I've been seeing recently, there is still pretty strong demand. I was actually expecting the demand to go down significantly over the last year, and that's not what we've been seeing. I mean, they're not at the all-time high that we saw during COVID, obviously. People are shifting away from that a little bit, but it's not like prices have dipped significantly by any means. We're still seeing an increase year over year right now in the market. So overall, cottage country as a whole, in Quebec at least, and at least around Montreal, the Laurentians, the townships, et cetera, the eastern townships, still a strong hold right now. So no big shift negatively.
Interesting. Okay, so let's say I have some money saved up. I want to buy a second property. David and I say, yes, we are ready to invest and get that dream lakefront property in the Laurentians. How does it work for financing? Because I already have a primary residence. I already have a mortgage. This would be a secondary property. Does this change things, Martin? Like what do I need to know before I go into this investment?
So generally what lenders look at, and I can tell you that we spend a lot of time sending addresses in cottage country to see if certain lenders are willing to finance that property. So right away, just because you find a cottage doesn't mean that all lenders are willing to finance you. The other thing they look at, so they put them under two categories. So they've got type A. Type A is a year-round, it's winterized, it's got a reliable source heat. So in other words, it's not a wood-burning stove that heats your property. And those are eligible for what are called insured mortgages. Very similar to your principal residence. You can put 5% down and have the mortgage insured. Type B, those are the ones that are more seasonal, a little bit more remote. They're not necessarily winterized. So a lot of people say, yeah, let's go up to my shack. Well, a shack is not necessarily that easy to get financed. And often it comes down to how much are you willing to put down? Can you put down 10, 20, 30%, if not more? And then perhaps a lender will consider it. And just because you've decided to put 10, 20, 30% down, again, what we need to do is send that address, send that location to a lender to see if they're willing to consider it. Not all properties by all lenders can be financed. So it's kind of a buyer beware, I found the shack of my dreams. It's lakeside. And unless you've got all the money to pay it outright, make sure that you can finance it before you make an offer on it.
Fred, is it an option to refinance your existing property and use those funds to purchase your secondary property?
Yeah, absolutely. But just to comment with what Martin says, technically, if you're not in the floating zone and it's a 3 season cottage, you could technically get it insured by Sagen or CMHC with a 10% down payment. If as Martin says, if the property is in decent condition, you shouldn't have an issue with 10%. And a 4 season, it's really you could do it with 5%. But again, as Martin says, not every lender goes everywhere. Like this is something to be verified. Now, if you do not have your down payment, what we love to do most of the time is to refine your property, maybe pulling out a 25, 50, 100,000 like that. use that money towards the down payment of your purchase, even for renovation. And obviously, if you don't want to pull out up to 100,000, we could set up a line of credit that giving you access to your equity. Like that, you could use it as a small ATM that you have at home and to fund your project or renovation. Again, do I really like a line of credit? Yes and no. If you're like to spend and you don't have a lot of control on yourself, as many people, they love to buy new stuff, I will not necessarily recommend a line of credit. Also, a mortgage sometimes it could be a little bit better because each payment that you make in a mortgage, you're paying a part of it towards the principal and the other part towards the interest, which is in the line of credit, you don't necessarily pay any principal because your obligation is to, it's very flexible, but your obligation is to pay interest only, which is, again, it really depends of you, but that's a way to finance your second purchase. And actually, sometimes we get the call, oh, I need 20%. It's not true. Technically, you cannot rent that property because if you're buying it with 5 or 10% down payment, we call that an insure loan mortgage. And it's not to do Airbnb or to rent it out, technically. Like again, but when you put 20% and more, maybe you could do whatever you want because there's no insurance on it.
You still need to qualify, though.
Well, of course, yes. And they're going to take the fact that you already have a mortgage into account, right? Like you already have significant debt. So you need to have significant income, I would assume, to be able to qualify for a second mortgage. Would you not?
Well, because
Yeah,
you're increasing the mortgage on your principal residence and you're taking on a second mortgage to buy your cottage. So that's where the qualification becomes very important. And that's why you should do these things before you go and see LJ and have LJ make an offer. Because at one point, if you don't have the financial wherewithal to support both properties, your transaction is not going to go through.
So to find out if you would even qualify to get pre-approved before you give LJ a call to actually start looking for that lakefront property, give Fred and Martin a call and find out what your options are. You can go to their website at fredandmartin.com and they can help get you into the cottage of your dreams. Coming up after the news, everything you need to know about investing in duplexes, triplexes, multiplexes, that's all coming up. This is Under One Roof MTL on CJD 800. My name's Robin Flynn with Fred Pichette and Martin Spalding from Fred and Martin Mortgages and LJ Aguinaga of LJ Realties. Duplexes, triplexes, multiplexes. That's a very Montreal situation. I don't know if it's as big in the rest of the country, but I feel like I had so many friends whose parents owned a duplex or a triplex. That just felt very, very Montreal. So I'm curious how things have changed in this market in Montreal over the years, as well as whether there are certain neighborhoods maybe that are better, more attractive for purchasing a multiplex. LJ, you are the Plex expert. You literally are the Plex doctor. So I'm curious. How has public interest in multiplex properties changed over the years? It seems like there's a growing sentiment to invest in real estate in this way.
100%. I think that over the last few years, we've really seen a huge push for financial literacy and education. And through that, a lot of people have decided to start investing in the stock market, and others have opted to invest in real estate effectively. I think it's been a bit easier to go ask possibly parents for help getting into their first real estate play because a lot of people are very bullish on the real estate market. It's something that's tangible, it's brick and mortar. A lot of the old school mentalities feel very strongly about it. So I think that's also helped the push saying, hey, mom and dad, how about we go buy this together effectively and get into this investment has been a strong push from all the entire young demographic and really a lot of people in general. So I'd say that the purchase of duplexes, triplexes, sixplexes, all the plexes, multifamily investments, as I call them, have been doing super well. And we see it in the numbers. I mean, obviously beyond the 2022, 2023 interest rate spike, which obviously slowed down the entire real estate market, we've seen plexes bounce back almost better than everything right now. And again, they are very sensitive to interest rates because that's effectively what's going to impact the cash flow of the property as well as the cap rate of the property. So because of that, we are seeing a huge bounce back in it because interest rates have come back down. But the reality is, if you're looking at house hack, which is when you, let's say, buy a triplex, occupy one unit, rent out the other two units, you can really bring your costs of living down significantly. I ran this example with two clients this week, and in both cases, they were going to be paying less than, I think, $1,200 a month to live in this property, be the owner of this property. And that's after taxes, insurance, some maintenance costs and whatnot. In some scenarios, we're even including property management costs in there. So it really depends on what you're looking to do, obviously, but the idea of being a homeowner, having an asset that's appreciating, that's in the brick and mortar space, and you're going to have two other people who are paying the bulk of your costs. And if you want to move out, obviously, buy a single family home. When you fully rent it out, it will be cash flowing additionally. Has really made it a very solid investment for anybody trying to get into real estate as a whole.
Is there one particular neighborhood in Montreal or multiple neighborhoods where buying a Plex makes more sense than in other neighborhoods, or is it just a great investment no matter where you're looking?
It always depends on what you're looking for, right? I always tend to stay within a 10-minute walk to a metro station as much as possible, maximum 15 minutes. That's always been my kind of North Star. And by doing that, it's always kept me accessible to downtown for young professionals who want to go work downtown. It's also kept me accessible to people who just are trying to get around the city, right? Our subway is super well connected, it's a super easy way to get around town. So by doing that, I've always opened up my horizons. So again, the bulk of my portfolio is in the Sud-West, Verdun. That's where I bought a lot of my buildings. I've got one in the plateau as well. But I have some clients who really prefer going out east, right? So we'll go into Hochelaga. We've gone as far as Mercier. And then I have other clients who want to go into Montreal North, for example, because obviously the numbers are really more interesting over there. Now, again, we're dealing with different tenant types. So everything has its pros and cons, if you will. But really, there is no right or wrong answer. I had one client buy a triplex in Il Perot. And they're like, yeah, we want to be out there. We want to rent out to the units. We want to live in one of them. And this is great. And the numbers made sense. So why not? So to me, if we can stay close to public transit, that always makes more sense. It just gives us more upside potential. But ultimately, if you're going to live in it, or depending on where you work or whatever is more, depending on where you live, sometimes you want to be, let's say, a 15, 20-minute commute to the property if ever you have to go there for some reason, if it's not being managed professionally by somebody else. So there's a lot of factors that I would drive in. But if it's really just a pure investment play, proximity to public transit.
So I want to hear your thoughts on when you're buying plexes or investment properties, do you try to concentrate your investments in a specific area, or are you just deal hunting? Because we're working with a client right now, and it must be really tough for them to manage because they don't have a property management company, but they've got properties in Gatineau, they got properties in Lévis, they've got properties in Montreal, North Shore, South Shore, Central. And I'm sort of sitting there going, they're both working and they have both have big jobs. And you kind of sit there going, wouldn't it be easier for you just to concentrate in one specific area and make your investments there? That way it'd be easier to manage. Your thoughts on that, LJ?
My thoughts are you're 100% right. It would be easier to manage, but it also comes down to how quickly do you want to grow, right? So if you can get into great deals, let's say buy a property, hold it for 3 to 5 years, optimize it over that period and be able to make a big delta or a big return on that first property, sell that, roll the profits into your next property, and then start concentrating your portfolio later in life, then that makes sense as well, right? It really kind of comes down to your approach in investing. And if you don't mind the potential commute to Gatineau or to Larry or to wherever else they had the properties, then all the power to you. I personally prefer to keep my portfolio close, but in the US, it's super common to be a foreign investor in the sense of you're out of state, right? Let's say you live in New York and you're investing in Arizona, you typically hire a property manager over there. The first step is obviously to have somebody you trust. And even somebody I met with this week, they said, yeah, I'm looking for a reliable property manager first. After that, I'll find a realtor. There's tons of realtors, but a reliable property manager is much more difficult to find. So from there, they are basing their entire investment thesis, if you will. So I would definitely say that managing properties that are up to 2 hours away with no property manager, I think that's a risky play, especially if it's not your full-time job, if you are working somewhere else, because you don't usually have the luxury of saying, oh, darn, there's a fire. I have to go to my property now. If you had 3 meetings scheduled with your boss or whatever else you had going on. But nevertheless, I mean, all the power to them. If they've been able to make it work, fantastic. They've definitely been able to cut on costs and they're probably making some pretty interesting returns. And I suspect eventually they're going to want to vertically integrate and keep everything closer together. But if not, I mean, whatever works for you, ultimately, I'm not here to tell somebody it's wrong.
I'm curious what your budget should look like once you've invested in a multiplex, because it's not just, setting aside money for maintenance, repairs, those little basic things, but tenant turnover can be costly as well. They decide not to renew their month. Maybe you're going to do a little bit of work and that unit will sit empty for a month or two. That is lost revenue that you need to factor into your budget, I presume.
100%. Now, again, I typically like to do whatever turnovers or work to the property as quickly as possible early on, so that after the fact, really, we're just considering doing cleanings, right? I haven't had to turn over a unit in between tenants in a very long time. Usually, when I buy the property, if it is vacant or if I can get it vacant, I'll do whatever renovations I want to do at that point in time. And then after that, it'll just be a clean between tenants, possibly a paint job. But a lot of the time, the tenants say, just let me get in on the 1st of July and I'll deal with the paint, or buy me a can of paint and I'll take care of it. Just let me move in on the appropriate dates. And it's been because we've done the work to our properties. They're in good condition. We've renovated the bathrooms, the kitchens. They're clean. They look good. I haven't had those issues. But yeah, if you're obviously dealing with properties that are older that has a bathroom from 1960 and it's falling apart, then 100% you're probably gonna have to deal with a vacancy of a month, possibly 2 months between the getting the bathroom cleaned up, ready, renovated, whatever it is, and the next tenant. So I've seen both cases. The other thing is some people, I mean, in Montreal, we have such a disparity in rents, right? You can have the same unit in terms of size for $1,000 and $1,800 just based on the renovations of it, right? So some landlords just say, you know what, give me $1,300 for the unit instead of the 16 I could be getting. And a lot of tenants say, yeah, sure, I'll take it as is, whatever. I'll save $300 a month or 500, whatever it might be, and I'll take it in its current condition. No problem for me. So.
LJ, quick question for you. Do you think it's possible for first-time home buyer to purchase a plec as their first property?
100%. 100%. We did a file together earlier this year. They
No,
bought a
but
duplex.
it's just a lot of people that they wish to have a plex, and they say, "Oh, I don't have enough down payment. I'm not sure. I'm not going to qualify. It's too expensive." And I always say, you have to try it because it's not as much more expensive than a condo with condo fees.
Well, we did the file together, right? And I think it was a 525 purchase, so that roughly would have been with the 5% down they put on the duplex. We were looking at about $27,000 down, plus let's say 15 grand in closing costs. I mean, you're looking at about 40K, and that was a couple that purchased it, right? So if you have two people who can save 40K between their FHSA, between their RRSPs, I mean, you're looking at $20,000 per person. If you have a young couple, I mean, they were super young. I think they were like 23 and 26. But even if you just look at the two 28-year-olds, for example, or a 28 and a 30-year-old, it's not crazy to think that they've been able to put aside $20,000 each over that period of time. So I think a lot of times people get held up on the belief that they need 20% down and they see $100,000 plus closing costs as something that is unachievable. But when they take a step back and realize, oh, I would be paying $1,800 a month in rent, or with the minimum down payment on the shorter amortization, it's going to cost me $2,200 a month. But to be the owner of this property, you know what? Yeah, I'll make the sacrifice, put in the extra $400 a month, and make myself a homeowner at this point.
If you're ready to purchase a multiplex, give the Plex Doctor a call, 514-709-6397. You can also visit the website at plexdr.com. Coming up, our property of the week plus the answer to our trivia question. We'll find out after we check traffic at the CJD 800 Traffic Center. This is Under One Roof MTL on CJD 800. I'm Robin, that's LJ, that's Fred, that's Martin. We are with you until 1 p.m. Before we get to the answer for our trivia question of the week, we've got to get to our property of the week, and this week we're heading east.
Investor alert. Welcome to 2575 to 2579 Rue d'Iberville, a fully detached triplex in the heart of Ville Marie with nearly $86,000 in annual revenue. 3 large units, each with 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2 newly renovated with sleek modern finishes and all with appliances. The roof was also redone in 2022 as well as some foundation work, so the property is in fantastic condition overall. The building sits on a very generous lot with 3 outdoor parking spaces, which is rare in the downtown area. This property is located just a 12-minute walk to the metro, and that's on Google Maps, so you can probably do it on 8 minutes if I'm being honest with you. It's steps away from parks, shops, and the essentials. We're offering this triplex at $1.48 million. It's a rock-solid opportunity. Contact me today to schedule your private tour, and if you're in the area, we can stop by Left Floors after, grab a steamy, maybe a poutine, and enjoy the discussion about the property.
Love that. Love that. 3 parking spots. Wow. So like each
Yeah.
unit gets its own parking spot? That's crazy. Love that.
And to be honest, 86,000 rental income, it's pretty good.
Question for you, LJ. What does fully detached triplex mean?
It's detached, so basically you're not attached on either side, right? In Montreal, a lot of the properties usually share a wall with a neighbor, so you have a mitoyen wall. Sometimes it's 2 walls, sometimes it's even more. But in this case, you have all 3 sides that are exposed, which means you have windows on all 4 sides. Pardon, not 3, 4 sides. So you have windows on all 4 sides, which is what has allowed the current owners to, when they were renovating, they made 4-bedroom units out of the 2 that they completely renovated, and every room has tons of natural light because you have that exposure.
Wow, that's so cool. You learn something every day. That's what I love about Under One Roof. Okay, let's get to the answer for our trivia question of the week brought to you by Felix and Norton. Our question this week: what's the difference between the amortization period and the mortgage term? The answer: amortization is the total time to repay the loan, whereas your mortgage term is the length of your current agreement. So, for example, if I may, correct me if I'm wrong, Fred and Martin, you could have a 30-year amortization, but you're on a 5-year fixed term, for example, and you're renewing your mortgage in 5 years.
You nailed it.
You
Yes.
got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to retire.
You guys can hire me. I'll be the new mortgage broker, ready to rock and
And,
roll.
There you
uh,
go.
and Robin, if you have a 30 years amortization, that doesn't mean you necessarily will pay that mortgage on 30 in the 30 years period. You could easily do some lump sum, paying extra, and renewing at the next term on a 20 years amortization period if you want. Like, it's just a number.
Interesting. It's just a number. Love it. Age and mortgages, just a number. Okay, we learned a lot on the show this week, so let's recap some of it. So we learned that while inflation is down, the numbers are actually a little bit more complicated. And as usual, this will impact the Bank of Canada's next interest rate announcement, which I believe is scheduled for June 4th. So we will be all over that. Also, we learned that while the vacation property market is cooling in Canada, it could be a good time for you to buy a cottage here in Quebec. The best people to talk to you about that would be Fred and Martin to get yourselves pre approved, and then go to LJ. He'll help you find something pretty on a lake somewhere. We also learned that buying a multiplex is a big investment, both in time and money. Consult with an expert, hire a property management firm like Plex Doctor. They can really help you oversee your investment to make sure that it's as passive as possible, because that's all what we really want, right? We just want passive income rolling in. That sounds like the dream. That's pretty much it for us for this week. We will be back next Sunday at noon right here on CJD 800. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about the guys and the show, go to the website underoneroofmtl.com. You can also get in touch with LJ, Fred, and Martin individually. LJ, where do people go to reach you?
Best place is to go to my website, ljrealties.com, or on all socials with the handle LJ Aguinaga. That's LJAGUINAGA, or LJ Realties with an IES at the end. You can also call or text me at 514-500-4040. And if you're looking to free up some time for some of your properties, feel free to contact my property management company, Plex Doctor, to take over and give you back your hard-earned time. You can find us at plexdr.com, or you can reach out to Thierry, our property manager, at 514-709-6397.
And Thierry's good people. We like Thierry. He's
We like
great.
Gary. Rock star.
Fred, Martin, where do people go to get in touch with you?
So if you're self-employed, maybe you're drowning in debt, you're a first-time home buyer, you want to tap some equity into from your home because you're retired and your pension is just not keeping up, give us a call. You can reach us through fredmartin.com. Our digits are there. You can send us an email. You can book a meeting, or you can simply call us, fredmartin.com.
And fredandmartin.com.
That's right.
If you missed anything, you can listen to this show in its entirety on the iHeartRadio app. We're also on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, and that includes every single episode of Under One Roof MTL that has ever aired. You can go and binge listen like Netflix. For LJ, Fred, and Martin, I'm Robin. Have a wonderful Sunday.